I'm your host, Scott Norton, and welcome to At Large. On this show, I talk to world-class creatives who use business to bring their ideas to life. We'll hear about their creative practices, their most interesting stories, and the lessons that'll inspire you the way that they've inspired me. My guest today is Fabien Riggall. Fabien is the founder of Secret Cinema, a groundbreaking live recreation of film that puts the audience at the heart of the story. In its 17 years since founding, Secret Cinema has produced 70 shows from Blade Runner to Bridgerton. It's welcomed over 1.5 million audience members, and last year, Secret Cinema was acquired for over $100 million. We sit down with Fabien in London, the home of Secret Cinema, to talk about the power of true immersion, navigating the entertainment business, and the influence of rave culture. If you love film, you'll love this episode. Please enjoy my conversation with Fabien.
Where'd you guys go for lunch?
This place called Duck Soup.
Like
it's a
the
really,
Groucho, or the Marx Brothers film.
Yeah, I think that's what it's named after. It's like a little, it's really good actually. It's like a little tapas-y type place.
Cool.
It's in Soho and it's really good. It's so good though that the waiters are a little, you know when it's, the place is so good that they just have this little thing,
Yeah.
annoying thing.
Yeah.
Where you just, they need the table back. And anyway, I'm complaining again, but it was great. And then this morning I had this it was amazing. The first sun we've had here for
Oh my gosh,
years.
It's beautiful today.
What about you? You went to Hyde Park?
I had breakfast with a friend at 8 and then walked around Hyde Park getting inspired and doing research.
Nice.
Had lunch with a friend in Shoreditch and then biked over here.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's been a great day of motion. Well, Fabien, thank you for joining us on At Large.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
It's great to have you here today. I'm very excited to talk to you because I've been coming to the UK for over 10 years, and invariably on every trip, Secret Cinema comes up. People are excited to go to one, or they've just come off the heels of one. And when I told people I was sitting down with you, their eyes light up. And it seems like Secret Cinema brings so much joy to people. And so I'm really thrilled to speak to someone who's brought that to society. I'm also excited to talk to you because I think that one of the most special things that an artist can do is invent a genre or invent a subgenre. And you think about Tarantino as a filmmaker kind of created his own genre of Tarantino films, which of course many other people have tried to replicate. I feel like you have done that with what Secret Cinema is, and the creation of this specific genre and this specific form of I guess theatrical cinema. And for so many listeners out there who haven't heard of Secret Cinema or have never experienced Secret Cinema, can you describe what the experience of attending a Secret Cinema performance is like for an attendee?
Sure. I think maybe I'll describe initially where the idea came from briefly, as I guess I was a participant in the only Secret Cinema when I was young. The first film I went to go and see, I was living in Morocco at the time, and I found out that there was this cinema, and I went to the cinema without knowing what I was going to go and see, and I was 11 years old, and I bought a ticket, and it was an old dusty cinema in Casablanca, and I bought a ticket in it, and the film was Once Upon a Time in America. And I went into the cinema and experienced this 3.5-hour, very beautiful, violent gangster film. And I became that character. It was just this moment where I wasn't in a cinema anymore. I was literally in the movie. And I think that stayed with me when the beginnings of Secret Cinema was sort of taking shape, was this idea of being able to live inside a film where there was no difference between the audience and the performance, as it were. That's what I found so fascinating as a child, and I think I brought that with me when I started Secret Cinema. To give you a sense of how Secret Cinema works, essentially, instead of watching a film, we take a film, we reimagine it as a immersive theater experience. It's less of a performance because essentially it's more of a film that you're part of. So it's almost like you're not watching film, you are the film, you become the film. So to give you an example, one of my favorite productions that we put on was Shawshank Redemption. It was a film that always struck me, when I first saw it. And the idea of how a Secret Cinema might unravel is that you would buy a ticket and you would get sent a code, and that code you have to enter into a website. And that website then is a bit like, I guess, a social network for that film. You put in your details, you put in the code, and it would then, you would go through an interview process, so almost like a test. And then a week before, you get told the secret location, and you would turn up at the first location, which was a library, which we converted into a courthouse. And you would stand in front of a judge and you'd be charged with a crime that you hadn't been committed. And then you'd be put into a bus and taken to a school, which we transformed into a prison. And there you would be, basically, you would follow the same narrative as the main character of the film, Andy Dufresne.
What you're describing is the experience of a single individual, and yet many people can buy a ticket to secret cinema. So are people shoulder to shoulder with other people experiencing being sentenced?
Yes. So, I mean, we structure it and design the experience so that you have essentially the whole, the way I see the stage of a theater is the website is part of the narrative, is part of the show. So the website allows you to create the story and the narrative. And then with Shawshank, we had 2 different buildings. And so we designed it so that there were 50 people who were almost playing the role of the court. Then we have actors who are playing the roles of the judge, and then you get charged with a crime. And basically 400 people a night were charged for a crime and put into a bus and sent to the prison. So what was interesting about Shawshank Redemption was that the first busload was 50, and then there would be another busload every half an hour. But by the last busload, there were 400 inmates, prisoners in the prison. So we had our 40 actors plus the 350 audience. But maybe I'm getting a little bit too technical kind of explaining it. But essentially, you have 400 people, depending between 400 and 5,000 people a night attending. And we design the experience so that the audience become the actors, and we have a group of actors that are playing the roles, guiding the audience through the experience. So essentially for Shawshank, our actors were playing the roles of some of the prisoners and the guards bossing people around.
And it continues?
Yeah, so the way it works is that for the first few hours of any secret cinema show, you're inside the world. So for Shawshank Redemption, you're inside the prison and you're navigating this new reality. And it's done very, very strictly as the Stanford experiment. It was very strictly done. And the actors are taught to not act, to just play, to be the role, to be the characters. And then after about 2-3 hours, there's a sort of finale of the initial part of that show. And then we had a kind of a riot that would take place. That prison riot would mean that everyone is then confined to the gymnasium where they would watch the film. And then we'd play the film. But as you're watching the film as a prisoner, there's guards, around you in the cinema. So it's almost like you're watching the film, but there's a mirror of actors in front of the screen bringing it to life.
And you're still an inmate.
You're still an inmate. So it never breaks character from the moment you arrive to the moment that you leave.
Wow.
And for Shawshank Redemption, actually, we had a ticket which allowed you to stay the night. So we actually created a secret hotel in which the audience could stay the night. They just had to be put in a prison cell.
And the end result is an experience which proxies or even amplifies the experience that you had in that theater in Morocco, where you became one with the characters and you entered the screen. And you've created something that requires 5 to 6 hours, that is a limited experience that sells out and that is completely immersive. Most people are experiencing this almost like watered down version of the cinema outside of the cinema. You've created something in the opposite direction that allows people to completely inhabit it and requires complete and utter focus and attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think I founded Secret Cinema, but I really think that the audience created it because their belief and their desire for something more physical, more interactive, more of an experience was what pushed Secret Cinema to where it got to.
And then how did you go from, okay, I've created this one immersive experience, this one installation, this one ticketed event, to I'm going to create a self-sustaining business out of this. And I'm going to turn this into a commercial enterprise with employees that stands on its own 2 feet and does this over and over again. What clicked for you? Tell me a little bit about the process of assembling that vision.
Well, I think initially this, I was always, when we had a short film festival, I always believed that there was this huge opportunity to socialize a film festival, to make film festivals less, I guess, restrictive. And then evolving into secret cinema, I think it just hit a nerve. It was at 2007, so it was really the beginning when we were starting to use our phones more. It was much, the beginnings of social media, I guess, and the beginnings of the rise of digital culture. And I think this idea around secrecy and around, this ephemeral kind of temporary kind of world that you just had to be there for, it just really hit a nerve. And it was just the passion of it, I think, and the experience of putting these things together, almost like each time was another big production. It was like another big club night, as it were, but it just grew and grew and grew. When we were starting to do 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 people, and then at one point we were selling 30, 40,000 tickets without revealing the film or the location and bringing in 2-3 million pounds worth of revenue without actually revealing the product. I realized that there was a powerful opportunity here because secret cinema was representing everything that the film industry wasn't. And I think that's when I started knowing that I couldn't run it like an underground project anymore. I needed to make sure I brought, the right, business team in and people in to help me sort of commercialize it. So at that point, we're doing things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Battle of Algiers, Shawshank Redemption, films that were sort of more independent, an art house. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to put on big mainstream films that was going to pay for the more experimental films. So we were doing things like Grease, Top Gun, Lost Boys, Back to the Future, these sorts of films. So yeah, at that point I was, but to be honest with you, the creative and the experience and just creating the joy that people I think felt with secret cinema was just my obsession above everything. And I think the team that I brought in all felt the same sort of sense of that this was the most important thing, was what people, the spark in people's eyes and the feeling and the connection, and that was the most important thing. And then I would just find ways to bring in different folks to help me on the business side. But
yeah, but then your North Star was enabling people to have that transcendent moment, where they become one with the story.
Absolutely, and they go deeper into it. So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, we had 40 actors, but we also worked with many artists who suffer from different mental illnesses, and we were trying to promote a mental health charity. I really believe that culture and entertainment should be something that we can look really deep into, and that message that comes out of those stories can be something we can go deeper into. So
yeah, which we'll talk about. How did you find the experience of transitioning from a founder and creator to an owner operator of a business? I mean, you use this phrase like bringing in a business team. Were you still managing people? Did people look to you for leadership management? Like, what was the role that you actually crafted for yourself as the organization grew?
I was a leader of the movement, if you call it that, or of the vision and the architect of that vision. But in terms of my role, it was a great struggle for a while, because I was not only the creative director of the company, but I was also the CEO of the company. And that transition was always a challenge and a battle with myself, which is how can I, be the artist that is, responsible for the overall output of each performance and every experience, plus also be the manager and make sure that the company is fulfilling its business needs. So yeah, that was always an interesting challenge. When we did Back to the Future, we went from maybe, I think, 40,000 tickets sold to 85,000 tickets sold.
Across how many performances?
So that was across 2 months, I think 3 months of performances for Back to the Future.
Wow.
And yeah, when we put on Back to the Future, that film has such a resonance with the audience that it, doubled our audience within one go. And I think that was the point where I really felt the pressure, because I was still just obsessed about the production and making sure the production worked. But, in hindsight, perhaps as we grew, we should have done certain things where I should have made sure that I brought on a big enough team across the business side of things.
Did you hire in a single business leader to be like a president, or did you have a team of diverse leaders that all kind of reported to you?
I had a team of creatives who all reported to me. And in a way, that's what allowed, I think, the project to grow so quickly and for it to get to where it was because no one was saying no. But then as it grew, I brought on different partners and folks across operations, across management. But essentially, it was always very much myself as the CEO and the creative director.
And what's nice about selling something before you deliver the product is you've got a negative working capital cycle. So you'd sell tickets and collect money, and then you could use that to actually put the shows on. Did you have any needs to finance or fund the business from outside sources?
The main investors in the early stages were the audience because, essentially their money built the shows. But I did take an initial round of investment in the early, just before Back to the Future, just a minority stake in the business that allowed us to invest a little bit more in the team.
Was demand generation ever an issue for you? Or would the shows always sell out based on word of mouth?
Yeah, the shows were selling out most of the time, and they were selling out really quickly. Back to the Future it basically broke the server of the ticket company that we were working in, but not just the server of our page, but all of the ticketing. I think it just hit a nerve. That film and Secret Cinema just had they were just so closely connected.
Oh my gosh, I can totally see that because, to be the promise of being Marty McFly is irresistible. Yeah,
it's essentially this idea of a kid going back in time and meeting his mother and being able to become who he wants to be. There's that nostalgia.
Such a fun, energetic film too.
It is, yeah.
What's his name? Christopher Lloyd, is that Doc?
Christopher Lloyd, and
he's so good in that.
Yeah, amazing. And we built the town, and just for Secret Cinema, we never gave the main characters were always played by actors.
Yes.
So you would become a citizen of Hill Valley. When we got it, we were so excited. We sold all these tickets, and I was like, okay, we're going to build the town. We're going to build Hill Valley, and it's going to be a living and working town. And therefore, we had 65,000 citizens, that bought tickets that became a citizen of Hill Valley in 1955.
Wow.
And so then we were able to, that audience is like most people you sell theater tickets to, or cinema tickets, or tickets to gigs, and you buy the ticket and then you remember, a week before you're excited to go, but there's no relationship from the moment you buy the ticket to the moment you go to the show. But with us, from the moment you buy the ticket to the moment you go to the show, we have an engaged audience. So we were speaking to them through our website and talking to them and building community.
Yeah. And what were the elements that were tough about this business model? Because we talked about some of the attractive elements, but what made this business model tough?
It was a ridiculously heavy business, stressful, anxiety-inducing business to put on, because each different production, of which we did, I think, close to 60 productions in the 15 years I was running Secret Cinema, each production was reinventing. It was almost reinventing a new format, a new production, new product, a new experience. So it was like having to find a venue, build the actual infrastructure to have people come there, decorate it all, build the sets. So we're almost like we were having to start again with each different production. But there was this beautiful energy that the team, the Secret Cinema team had, and belief in it, and this alchemy around it that made it so special that essentially it's what just took us through, and we all felt this immense responsibility towards what we'd built. That's what took us through. But the brand was such a powerful project. And I think that in hindsight, the difficulties were, how can we create a replicable production that we can grow around the world and make it more dynamic and easier to scale?
How did you define success of what you created?
I think in the early days, towards when we were doing Moulin Rouge, Doctor Strangelove, 28 Days Later, those kind of productions from 2014 to 2017, when Secret Cinema really grew big, I was running it before I took investment and brought in partners. The definition of success was just the word of mouth. It was what people were talking about on social media. And what was extraordinary is that Secret Cinema's tagline was "Tell no one." And we put on a show where 30, 40,000 people would keep a secret. And
keep a secret meaning
they're not allowed to reveal.
They're not allowed to reveal what film it was.
Yeah, and then the run would happen for a few months, and people online would just talk about it in a cryptic way. And if anyone revealed it, they were immediately shut down by the community. But the way we define success is that I would become an audience member. That's the way I tested the shows and the previews. I would go through the same experience, and I would hide in a thing so they wouldn't know who I was. And then my team as well would test it, would trial it, and we could sense it. Where I knew that it was really going to go off was, for example, we did Moulin Rouge. We built essentially the streets of Montmartre and rebuilt the Moulin Rouge. 1,000 people attended each night, and they were given the roles of characters who lived in Paris during the Belle Epoque during that time. And the real success was when you couldn't tell who the actors were and who the audience were. And when there was just this feeling of this new reality, really, which became, each film. So, it's immersive just means you're in an interesting experience. Life is immersive. I don't know.
Well, I think immersion is in a moment where you silence the discursive mind.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
And you talked about rave culture earlier.
Yeah.
And at a rave, you have a moment where you silence the discursive mind, right? And you're not worried about the past or the future because those things are illusions. You're only in the present. Yeah. And you might be in the present real, or you might be in the present that is simulated, right? And in the case of secret cinema, the present is simulated to the point of feeling real. But if you are lost in the trance of dance, then that's a form of immersion where you get a brief moment of peace by being immersed and by essentially, transcending, by leaving yourself.
Absolutely. No, that's a really lovely way of putting it. I see it also that secret cinema was built on this idea of mystery in a world where everything is automated and everything is available, and that we can never seem to get away from that reality. And I think what you just described is that you go into the mystery, you go into the secret. When you have a beautiful moment in the present, it's mysterious. I think mysterious is immersive,
Yes.
Not knowing, because everyone just knows everything all the time. And as soon as you have a moment in your day where you have any time at all, you're immediately on your phone to sort of overload information. I think that's where secret cinema was like, no phones are allowed. You get given a character and identity, which essentially is a projection or an extension of who you are. And if you want to, play a role of whatever you want to be, you can be that character, and you don't need to check your phone or record what you're experiencing in order to let other folks know, because that was against the rules. You weren't allowed to tell people.
Right.
But I think immersion or experiential experiences is this idea of packaging pockets of life and then selling them as products. I always had an issue with the way that folks described what we did in many ways, because it really, you said it very beautifully. Like, essentially, to me, is if someone came out of a secret cinema and their eyes was just open and they were just had a night where they felt themselves, they felt they had to play the roles to feel themselves, Like for Shawshank Redemption, people were locked up for the night, to feel free. And there was something always interesting about that.
Well, a founder that I work with has this great saying that human beings are the only animals that live in zoos of their own design.
Yeah.
And we go to the cinema, we go to the secret cinema to have a brief respite from that zoo by, in a way, like transporting ourselves to another world and entering another world. Books, by the way, books are immersive, right?
Yeah,
A book is
sure.
ink on a page, but a good book is completely transportive.
Yeah, and you have to really let go of everything in order to experience. To you have to leave your phone away and to be able to, because otherwise you'll never read the book.
And what is the message of your work? What's the message of these things you create? Is there an activism to it? Have you had shows that have a particular message or point of view?
Yeah, I think every single film is a form of is where you have to let go and experience the story and become part of the truth of that story. And if it's a good film, it tends to be truthful to what you believe to be truthful. And so I think that with every production, we would find when we did James Bond, Casino Royale was a really extraordinary James Bond, where he was quite emotionally and mentally, not stable at the beginning of that film, if I remember rightly. And so we worked with a charity, Calm, that worked with male suicide. When we did One for the Cuckoo's Nest, we worked with a mental health charity. when we did Stranger Things, the Netflix show, we worked with a children's charity, so we were always trying to engage a bit deeper. And I think felt responsibility that if we're asking the audience to participate in these worlds, that they should participate also in the deeper message of the story.
Sure. Because so many of these films were messages. I mean, Les Miserables and police brutality, or Battle of Algiers around colonialism.
I see cinema as something that is representing life and also representing society and the problems in it. And yeah, it can be pure entertainment and escapism, and that's fantastic. But there's not enough, I think, films like Battle of Algiers, today being made.
Well, that's right. It feels like they feel like films of a different era that have these type of message to them. And there are, of course, independent films that have messages today, but they are much fewer and far between. So in a lot of ways, you're taking on a certain, I guess, responsibility or a mantle to show people these films and deliver the messages of those filmmakers and directors and writers for the first time for a contemporary audience.
For sure. 80% of the audience had not seen Battle of Algiers. And I think we'd just done, I can't remember what the film was, but I think, we would do something like Back to the Future and we'd have 80,000 people, and then we'd do something like Battle of Algiers or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a bit more of a bigger movie, but yeah, it would allow folks to experience it. No, I think that the state of cinema right now is in a position where most of the talent is working in television, and most of that talent is, some of them have the ability to make the films that they wish, but many are driven by the algorithm, or they're driven by the idea that we're going to tell this story that could be told in 2 hours in 15. There's extraordinary talent out there, and there's extraordinary films from the past, and you can't access them.
And there has been a move of resources to television because of the streamer's business model.
Yeah.
Right? Because a streaming business model is a CAC to LTV business model.
Yeah.
Bigger the lifetime value, the better, and the lower the cost of acquisition.
Yeah.
And a one-off film doesn't drive lifetime value.
Yeah.
Right? But a seasonal TV show drives lifetime value because it's the reason why someone doesn't give up their membership after 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And that's the economic model of these guys. So they favor television.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. And a lot, Spotify and Netflix and all these companies that essentially, they're listed companies, they need to make money. They need to keep us at home watching content, and they call it content. And that's pretty depressing.
I always find that term tough.
Yeah.
And Battle of Algiers is an interesting choice too, because, and you can feel free to correct me on this if my facts are wrong, but I believe that the main characters of that film were street cast.
Yeah. They shot it only a few years after. This is what was extraordinary. I would advise anyone who's listening to see that movie, because especially with what's going on today in the Middle East, but it's extraordinary. They shot it, they did a lot of street casting, a lot of the main actors that were playing
street casting is essentially going out into the street in Algiers and seeing a young boy or seeing a character and saying, hey, do you want to be in a film?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you've never acted before, you look the part.
It's working with non-actors, which means the film becomes far more real.
And that's what secret cinema is, which is so cool. It's
allowing the
sort of
audience to do that.
self-imposed street casting.
Exactly.
If you buy a ticket.
Yeah. When you work with non-actors, it allows the film to breathe in a way that you couldn't do with real actors. I'm not, actors are an extraordinary craft.
No, of course. I mean,
but I think
one or the other.
The idea of cinema that is like, essentially it's like watching a documentary.
It's an interesting hybrid.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid between documentary and narrative scripted film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I heard a story of a performance you did or an experience you did where people weren't allowed to speak. Tell us a little bit about what that performance was and how that device worked.
Okay. Yeah, so this was the Handmaiden Park Chan-wook's film, and I was always obsessed with Korean cinema. And this film was... Yeah, it was a film that hadn't come out. So it was part of the Secret series. So we wouldn't reveal what the film was. So initially we made, it was a secret, tell no one production. And it was a very sensitive film. It was one of the most erotic independent art house films of recent times. And it was, we wanted to create that feeling that the main character in the film goes through when she's trapped inside this estate where this master forces her to read poetry. And so in order to do that, we created this rule that people were not allowed to speak. They're only allowed to write messages to each other. And so silence was the state So we'd create these different states. So what we did was that we had everyone arrive at this beautiful old theatre, the Troxy, which we transformed into the estate of this master. And we separated men and women. So they had to go through different entrances, and they were given the rule not to speak. And we had a film composer called Tom Chichester Clark, who created a piece of music that was like a soundscape for the space. And then we had the stage was transformed into the house that the film is set in, and characters from the film were walking in and out of the stage. And it was it allowed us to, I think, tell this very beautiful, sensitive, erotic film in a way that was very authentic. And what was extraordinary really was, it's quite a explicit film, and we actually designed these like Japanese screens. So we had the silhouettes of the actors during the film basically bringing to life what was going on the screen, including all the love scenes. And it was a very, I think, people's like immediacy to be able to watch pornography, etc. But no one had sat in a room with 1,200 people all wearing gowns and not speaking and watching a film. Yeah, so it was a very special event.
Wow. And ultimately, you decided to transition out of secret cinema and to sell the business.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I think it was, during the time when we did Star Wars, where we took over this old factory, which was called Canada. It was Canada Water, and it was an Evening Standard factory.
With Printworks?
Yeah, well, it became the Printworks. But we had it a year before the Printworks took shape. And the first production we put on there was Star Wars. Then we did 28 Days Later, and then we did Doctor Strangelove. And close to 180,000 people came. But when we did Star Wars, I was like, we'd just done Back to the Future the year before. And Star Wars, I was like, okay, we're made. We managed to get the rights of the biggest franchise in history. And, it's a film people just adore, and the fandom, and, it's extraordinary around it. It was, incredible pressure to put that on. But what happened was that the scale of it just grew to astronomical proportions. So at that point, I think the budget went from 3 million to 8. At that point, I made the decision that we needed to get further investment. And so I was looking at different opportunities, and so I decided that we would take a sizable investment to go into the product. And I think because the business, to sell close to 150,000 tickets a year was a pretty extraordinary feat. But we were so busy putting on the shows that I wanted to invest in the brand and grow the value around the brand, which was really strong. But we were so obsessed with each production, we weren't building secret cinema products, as it were. And the idea behind secret cinema was always to build out a new way of experiencing film, and then build a studio that would then produce our own films and then turn it into a mini Disney, as it were.
With original works.
With original works. So that was always the idea. And it was to look at, cinema, and then music, and then art, and then other areas that we tapped into, making the world more immersive, let's say. But in terms of the decision, it was important that I felt, responsibility to the team, to the thousands that have worked on secret cinema and created it and worked on it, to get investment and get that investment so that we could build out, a stronger foundation for the business.
What were the nature of those investors? Like, what type of investor looks at a...
Initially, the first 3 investors, one was Social Capital out of Palo Alto. The other was...
Chamath.
Yeah, Chamath. Cirque du Soleil, Guy de Liberté.
The guy from Montreal?
Yeah. And another chap called Neil Hutchinson. Those were the 3 investors, which they put in, each $1 million and gave us a little boost. And then in 2016, 17, so after we did Star Wars and had that incredible year where we scaled so quickly, and I felt like I needed to take investment. Then I took an investment from a private equity company.
Gotcha. Was that the sale, or?
No, that was I sold a majority, a controlling stake.
Okay.
But no, I stayed on up until 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So I was leading and running Secret Cinema for 60 productions. I think it was close to 60 productions, with Blade Runner being the last one that I was directing, that I was overseeing. And then from that point onwards, we then grew the team, and a CEO was brought in. And then from 2018 all the way through the pandemic, to 2022, where it was sold to another company. Yeah,
And did you lead the sale process, or were the private equity investors running
No,
that?
so I stayed on as chief creative officer up until the exit, but I stepped back in 2018 at the point that a new CEO was brought in.
Gotcha. And tell us a little bit about how the IP and licensing rights work for this. So if you want to put on Star Wars or hell, if you want to put on Battle of Algiers, who do you go to permission to do that?
I mean, I think what happened was that, when Secret Cinema started in 2007, we originally did a deal with a company called Tartan Films, which are the biggest independent movie distributors of that time. Extraordinary label. They were like, I guess, the movie of those days, right? And that was Paranoid Park. But we were growing it and we were licensing the films and had great relationships with all the studios because they just saw it as an opportunity to bring films back from their catalog that they weren't doing anything with. So it was a great opportunity for them.
They had no reason to say no.
No. And I think that as it grew and they realized, the potential of it, to the fact that we were doing close to 100,000 for Star Wars, I think then, it just became more.
And they gave you a workable rate? Because I could see how, like, Paranoid Park, they'd say, oh, yeah, okay, whatever, pay us this. But with Star Wars, they've got something to protect. Obviously, you were a known quantity at that point, highly respected. But did you ever run into licensing issues where the number they asked for was just too high?
I mean, I think, the whole entertainment business is in a kind of state of flux and shift. And I think the studio system is suffering greatly. And I think that at the point in which we had a great relationship with launching new films like Grand Budapest Hotel. We did, I think, close to 10 new films as part of our release. And so they would actually pay us a fee to do some of those films. But yeah, no, I think that the Secret Cinema had built a new way, a new product, as it were, a new concept for a movie ticket, if you want to call it a movie ticket. And so I think as it grew, then because it was a new format, it was sitting between different licensing rights, so it was there were different rights for different forms.
Yeah. So it actually gave someone the opportunity, or gave you, the two negotiants, an opportunity to actually have kind of a blank slate of what it should look like.
Yeah.
Versus saying, oh, well, this is the going rate for public performance, and this is the going rate for whatever merch rights or something like that.
Yeah. I think it was, the reason why Back to the Future, I met with Bob Gale and he was incredibly supportive. We built a really good relationship with the studios, but obviously as we grew, it became a little bit more competitive and complicated to be able to. But we secured pretty much the biggest IPs in the world, and the main reason we got Star Wars because of Kathy Kennedy, who was a producer on Back to the Future, and she heard about Secret Cinema and she was just a great champion of it, and without Kathy Kennedy, we would not have got the rights of Star Wars. So we managed to get the rights from...
And she was like George Lucas's right-hand person?
No, she was Spielberg's producer. Yeah.
Right,
so
right.
she's really one of the most formidable people in Hollywood. She produced E.T., she was executive producer on Back to the Future, she did a lot of Spielberg's films, and then she, recently took on the job to essentially produce all of Lucasfilm's productions.
Yeah, within Disney.
Star Wars within Disney, Indiana Jones, etc.
And what are some of the biggest lessons that you learned from the process of finding financial partners, bringing those on, and including selling the company? Are there any lessons to impart from younger entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think, becoming an entrepreneur is a deeply creative process. It's very emotional. You have to, it's a sensitive, I think, tapping into ideas and stories. It's about being emotional, all right? It's about being sensitive to what, how you capture an idea and bring it to life and make it happen is a tough procedure. And I think that one thing I think I could have done better would be able to separate the two sides of the business, the creative side, which needs to be free and fluid, but it needs to also deliver business results, and the CEO and the management side. I think that was always a thing that I was always challenged with, with those two things. And when I brought investors on, I have to say thank you to all the investors that came into Secret Cinema. They were all taking a risk. They were all, but their nature was to make the business predictable and scale and sell it.
That's right. And investors, their job is to be sensitive in a different way, and that's sensitive through comparison. It's been said that comparison is the essence of investing, which is very different than the creative act. And investors can also be, and I can say this as an investor myself, investors can be very reductionist too.
Yeah.
Because, every month, every quarter, there's a P&L, and you start to see the world through these P&Ls versus all the sensitivities of the human details, because you can never see on a spreadsheet or on a P&L whether or not people are experiencing that immersive, transcendent experience that is the North Star that you described earlier.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that for example, when my first investors or when I took a majority investment into the company, quite naturally, the investors wanted to do a lot of surveys and data reports and understanding. And so they would send surveys to the audience as they were leaving. Did you enjoy the experience? What part of the experience did you enjoy the most?
Well, they're still processing it too.
Yeah. But they were right. I'm right.
Exactly.
In the battles that I would have and, the conflicts I would have were what I think most entrepreneurs and founders go through and most investors have to deal with. And you, with an investor hat on, understand it. And I understand the nature of the investor. Just choose your partners wisely.
Yes.
It was all I would say. And as a creative person, you're gonna be, sometimes a little challenging and combative because, you're essentially,
you have to be unrelenting with your vision.
I'm an artist. I create worlds and productions where that I see it as a kind of giant installation of the way that, we can experience life. I see it like that in a way. And then I'm also, a business person. I'm also all these different hats. And I think that's where, but it's just about the balance. And I think now I've really understood that balance and what's important and how you can still deliver incredible results and build a beautiful product. And you don't need to strip away everything that made that product beautiful in the first place because you have to, strip away everything that was beautiful about it.
Right. It comes up a lot on this show is that the difference, the combination, the separation, the tension between the creative and the commercial side. Yeah. We had another guest describe himself as executive creative protector, as a leader of creative teams.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why journalistic outfits, right? Publishing outfits have the publishing side, which is essentially advertising sales, and they have the editorial side, and they're run as these two different businesses with two different leaders. And at the same time, many of those businesses with that organizational design are dying. And they're going out of business.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're just losing the creative editorial side and the whole of editorial becomes commercial, essentially.
Yeah. What are some of your biggest creative inspirations?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the inspiration that brought me to create Secret Cinema was Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America, because it was a film that I think could never be made now, a 3.5-hour epic film. But in terms of real inspiration, the situationists, Guy Debord that created the ruling principles of Burning Man, this idea that there is no spectacle.
Debord created the ruling principles of Burning Man?
Yeah, essentially it's the inspiration behind Burning Man. This idea of participation, of community, of this idea of exchange, and that we're all essentially playing a role and we're all taking part. I think really that this idea of that time of the rave scene where, essentially we were in warehouses.
And what year range was this?
So this was in between the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. I would go to a lot of free parties in warehouses, which were most of them illegal. And people would just take over abandoned factories and spaces and turn them into raves.
What type of music was playing?
It's like electronic music. So it was the beginning of, the rave scene started in the late 80s, but I experienced it then. And, I was, during that time, with this sort of sense of freedom that, you could create something in these abandoned spaces became really a big part of the way that, you asked what the inspiration was. If I found an abandoned building and we were scouting for a building and I found an old factory or an old hospital, this was a great inspiration for turning that building into a stage where people could live inside it, for a few months. It was and I see it now today, just this extraordinary amount of space that is empty, that could be turned into theaters and spaces.
So discovering these warehouses is almost like looking at a blank canvas.
Yeah. Just imagine what you could do.
What could be there.
Yeah, exactly. So that building becomes the stage.
I'm very interested in rave culture, and England, of course, has a very important place in the history of raves and electronic music. And
Yeah.
it tends to be societies that have the most anxiety bottled up that needs to be released.
Yeah. And I think,
East Germany, like East Berlin.
Yeah, of course.
And then, of course, New York as well. But England, is really kind of famous for people having a very stratified social culture and then needing to blow off steam.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In the evenings and some points into the early mornings. How did you discover the rave scene?
When I was 16 or 15, I went to Glastonbury for the first time. And, that this was the beginning, I guess, of, when rave culture and dance culture really took off. And there were these like secret fields that you would just discover in the middle of the night when there were just these different tents and different electronic music and this sort of carnival kind of crazy atmosphere. And of course, there was, it was late night things when we were experimenting and stuff. But it just made me realize, actually. In fact, Glastonbury was the first time where it's such an extraordinary, Glastonbury was our Burning Man in a way. It's a festival where, there's a whole culture outside of the music side. There's this whole culture around activism and, it's always been pushing the boundaries. And it's like, I guess, a mini society. For 5 days, you go and live in some fields in Somerset and anything is possible. And I think that was a great inspiration for secret cinema. And just knowing that anything is possible.
Anything is possible and also impossible to predict.
Yeah.
Because you're not, going to a restaurant today, you look at it on Google Maps, you can see all the dishes, you can see the menu, you can see the ratings, you can see the interior. And all of a sudden, when you're there, you're comparing your experience to your imagined, predicted experience.
Yeah.
Whereas in a great music festival, you are truly walking in with every expectation that anything is possible, but also no expectation of the specifics.
Yeah.
And you're just ready to be, ready to kind of ride the wave.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful place for the human mind to be, and the heart to be.
But I think we are naturally, we're naturally a mysterious species. Like, we're not meant to know so much.
Right.
We're not meant to have so much information. The default culture is not that I'm meeting you in real life, right? Why do I need to tell you I'm meeting you in real life or in person? Like, now the pandemic has moved us into this place where they're actually advertising to us to live in real, what is real life? So actually the default has become online. Like, we live online and real life is something that we go to.
Yeah, right.
And there's something that's so dark about that I can't get my head around.
Yeah, and the pandemic definitely switched that too, because it's like, the meeting is like by default on Zoom.
Yeah.
Unless you want to like do it in person.
Yeah, and then you have to say in person. And I was like, when Zoom got kind of like, I wrote something on Facebook, ironically, but I wrote, as soon as this pandemic is over, I'm never going to use Zoom again. It was just the thing I wrote. And it was just, everyone was commenting and going, yeah, I agree, because it was like just such a horrible
oh my gosh,
thing.
Overwhelming.
But the point I think that I'm really interested in is everyone I know that I have this conversation with, and I'm sure and from the different folks you've had on the show, everyone has mentioned this. Like, everyone is thinking about it.
Yes.
We're all addicted to this culture and it ain't making us happy.
That's right.
Like, we are not happy. And entertainment and culture is being essentially destroyed. And one day people will see entertainment as Amazon and that will be it. And we'll all be living in these kind of like headsets. Well, that's one view. But my view is that actually out of this AI revolution is going to come this new reality where actually using Instagram will be like, smoking and blowing smoke in someone's face.
That's exactly right.
You know what I mean?
I think it was 10 years ago, I had this realization that we are going to start seeing social media the way that we see junk food.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and you think about when I was growing up, we would have Doritos in the house and we would go to McDonald's on occasion. And in my household, and if, call me a snob or call me elitist or whatever, because I am a snob, we don't have Doritos in the house and we don't go to McDonald's, We do go to In-N-Out.
Oh, man.
Which I love. And I put it in a different category.
Yeah.
But I think that we're going to see screens and we're going to see these dopamine hacking applications and we're going to see Instagram and those in the same way. And my prediction is that there will be a new computing paradigm that actually relieves us of some of this addiction.
Yeah.
And that's an optimistic prediction.
Yeah.
But I think that we are going to graduate from the phone.
Absolutely.
And people are, look, Apple is clearly investing billions in AR and VR, and Facebook, Meta, they're investing billions in AR, VR, and you see startups like Humane, that are starting to change that. And I do think that someone's going to create a new computing paradigm, just like we move from the desktop to the mobile phone. We're going to move from the mobile phone into something that allows us to be human again, but have the connectivity of, all the world's information. I just think that's ultimately what we all want.
I think that's an amazing prediction, and I hope it comes true. I think it's like need to train AI to essentially make us experience reality again in a new way, And I think that's what's going to be interesting, is being able to actually just rewire our brains to not be so dependent on our phones. That they should be tools, not our entire lives.
Have you ever done breath work?
Yeah, I think, I have a friend in LA who's kind of really into that world. And I think I fainted last time, but it
might happen. Yeah, but I find that's another place where you can calm the discursive mind and truly immerse.
Yeah, I'd really like to explore it more.
Yeah, if you come to LA, I'll take you to a place called Open.
Okay.
That you would really enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
What advice do you have for younger people or earlier entrepreneurs who are trying to make a business out of something that's really different?
Well, first of all, I think the fact that they've got to that point where they've found something that they're passionate about that doesn't currently exist, or a category that is currently just, that they can see it being done in a completely different way. That's half the battle, is to kind of just identify that. My advice would be to definitely not have too many adults around when you're starting to build your initial product, as in be free to be able to explore. And, if I'd pitched Secret Cinema at the beginning, people would be like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? No one really understood what I was talking about at the beginning. I had to do it. So my advice to entrepreneurs is just do it, just build it, and don't listen to too many folks that are going to tell you that it's not going to work, because nothing really works until it does, if that makes sense.
No, well, I mean, and certainly adult supervision at the beginning of a truly breakthrough creation of a medium is not going to help.
Yeah, it's not. I think some people feel that they have to, do everything by the book. And it is important, I think, to make sure that you build a strong foundation, but it's really important to just go for it and to not worry too much. I do meet quite a lot of entrepreneurs and founders who are just obsessed with their idea being stolen or taken and sending NDAs and this and that. And I understand that to a certain extent, but essentially no one has the brain makeup as each person. Everyone is so different. So they just need to just get on and do it, and not worry too much about it being stolen by someone else.
So speaking of new ideas, what are you excited about now, and what are you thinking about working on next?
So my next project is called Future, and we are looking at the future of live music. So looking at how we can create a new form of live music experience, where instead of going to a traditional concert, you are going to a secret building, and that building has been transformed into the album.
Oh, fascinating.
That's what I'm kind of working on.
Almost like Secret Cinema, but for music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Huge potential there.
Yeah.
I can't wait to live inside my favorite albums.
Yeah. So
please do Kraftwerk Autobahn.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that for you.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Let's move into the quickfire round. So we do a segment where we do some quickfire, some hot takes. I'm curious about your answer to this one. Are you glad social media exists, or do you wish it never existed?
No, I'm glad that it exists so we can destroy it. No.
I love that answer. Okay, no, we're good. That's it. So I have a segment called Everyone's a Critic, where you critique something. Do you like it? Do you not? Adam Curtis. What are your thoughts on Adam Curtis and his work?
I mean, Adam Curtis is a friend. He's someone that has been a mentor, and someone I haven't seen for a while. He's very reclusive in a way. I think he's extraordinary. I think what he's done is emotionalize history and allowed us
What the?
So sorry.
What happened there? I thought you put on airplane mode.
I did.
Oh, you know what? Is someone texting you who's in your favorites?
No.
Oh, weird.
You know, what's interesting is...
Oh, because it's your Wi-Fi is still on.
Social media is interrupting what was a good answer to that question.
Ah.
What was the question?
So let's destroy it.
Oh, yeah, Adam Curtis.
Yeah, Adam
I mean,
Curtis.
I think it's extraordinary. So he has access to the entire archive of BBC, and he has his love of music and how he turns, these incredibly important moments in history into these like emotional narratives that he creates. I think he's brilliant.
I think he's brilliant too.
Yeah.
If people do critique, in some ways, he is almost like playing into the conspiracy theory narrative that he himself is trying to critique. If you watch some of his work,
yeah, of course, it's theater,
right? It's theater, and I love it.
What
I think everyone should watch.
And watching CNN is pure theater.
Oh, of course.
And watching your presidents in a debate is pure terror.
It's dark comedy. Okay, best Tarantino movie.
Pulp Fiction.
Agreed. My favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
Best Wes Anderson movie.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Also agree. I love that film. What is any other favorite films of yours that really stand out? Ones that haven't been mentioned on the show yet?
Yeah, there's this film. It's not my favorite film, but I think it's extraordinary. It's called Victoria, and it's a film set in Berlin about this girl who works in a cafe, and she meets this guy and basically goes to this club, and essentially the whole thing unravels across 2 hours, but it was shot in one take, and it's an extraordinary film.
What is a book that everyone should read?
I would say 100 Years of Solitude.
Marquez?
Yeah. In fact, I would say Love in the Time of Cholera, which is a love story set in Colombia that he wrote. It's just so beautiful. And there's something about his work that I think sort of really enhances the mystery of life, something that perhaps we've lost. And I think everyone should read that book.
Yeah. This question is so interesting because when I ask Americans this question, they always give me contemporary books. And when I ask Brits this question, they always give me classics.
Really?
Yeah. Because you have real schooling in this country.
Yeah,
you
you
learn the Queen's English.
Yeah, real fashion.
What is one thing you know to be true and wish the rest of the world understood?
Everything is made up and you can change it at any time. The truth is that everything is a construct, and I sometimes feel that people live their lives as if this is how it needs to be. It's like, no, it can be anything that you want it to be. Yeah, just know that you can change it at any time. And I wish as I'm growing older, I think I'm forgetting that as well a little bit.
Yeah, it is. We think we fall into certain assumptions and rhythms as we're older that when we're younger, it's much more of a blank slate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And do you cook?
No. I mean, I love cooking, but I'm
good. You love cooking. That
great.
counts as cooking.
Yeah.
We ask everyone for one good recipe. So what is a go-to dish that you make? In detail, describe the ingredients and the process.
I mean, I think that whenever I have a dinner party, I tend to have this one dish, which is, the simplest dish one could create, which is salmon with vegetables, in which I just throw every kind of vegetable with the salmon, with a lot of lemon, olive oil, salt, pepper, chili, and just put it in a foil and shove it in the oven. And every time it's a little different because I'll use different vegetables.
You put the salmon on top of the vegetables? Or you put them separate?
I put them all I put the vegetables on top of the salmon.
Vegetables on top of the salmon.
Yeah.
Skin on salmon?
Yeah, 100%.
And okay, so the skin is on the bottom on tin foil.
Yeah.
I imagine do you oil and salt the tin foil so it doesn't stick?
Yeah, no, I do. I sort of marinate the salmon first of all in the oil and the pepper and the salt. But yeah, you can tell I'm probably not the best chef, but
oh no, that sounds like an amazing dish to host because it's family style.
Yeah,
it doesn't have meat in it. It has lots of vegetables, and it's also not that labor intensive because you're basically serving people both a side dish and an entree at the same time.
Exactly.
So it's a brilliant dinner party hack.
Yeah.
Well, Fabien, thank you so much for joining us today on At Large, and we look forward to seeing the rest of your work.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to At Large. Today's episode was produced by Sick Bird Productions. Our theme song is Son of Sanford by Motion Worker. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and by email at atlargeshow.com. Follow me at SWH Norton on Instagram and Twitter, and DM me about the guests you want to hear on the show.